Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Friday, February 6, 2026. And if you have been following the health headlines, really over just the last 24 hours, you have probably noticed a massive surge of activity in the cardiology world.
Oh, absolutely. There is a buzz right now that, we really haven't seen in this field for, probably a decade?
At least. But before we get to the breaking news, I want to start with a sort of reality check that is, frankly, pretty uncomfortable to acknowledge.
It's uncomfortable, but it's completely necessary.
We have spent the better part of 40 years, maybe more, waging this relentless war on heart disease. We have entire aisles of pharmacies dedicated to it. We have statins, diet plans, stents, bypass surgeries.
We have smartwatches that monitor our pulse, apps that track our saturated fat. The infrastructure is enormous.
It is, and yet, despite all of that, cardiovascular disease is still the #1 killer globally. And for millions of people, the routine is just frustratingly similar. They go to the doctor, they take their daily statin, they get their blood work done.
And they're told, okay, your numbers look okay.
Exactly. And here's the terrifying part. Okay isn't actually good enough. Okay is still leaving millions and millions of people squarely in the danger zone for a heart attack.
That is the absolute crux of the problem. We have settled for what you could call management rather than true prevention for a long time. And a big reason for that is we hit a technological ceiling.
A ceiling.
We've basically maxed out what the current standard of care, which is statins, can actually do for the highest risk patients.
Until maybe yesterday. Because based on the research that dropped just yesterday, February 5th, in the New England Journal of Medicine, that ceiling might have just been completely shattered. We are talking about a brand new experimental pill. It's called Enlicitide. And the promise here is, well, it's massive. We're not talking about a new vitamin or some slight tweak to an existing statin.
No, not at all. This is a pill that mimics the power of these incredibly expensive, heavy-duty injectable biologic drugs. We're talking about slashing bad cholesterol by roughly 60%.
60% in a pill. It's a huge claim.
It's a very significant moment. This is the data from the CORALreef lipids phase 3 clinical trial. And what makes this deep dive so important today is that this isn't just about a new drug. It's about how this pill even works, how it survives the stomach, which is a feat of chemistry in and of itself.
And whether this marks the end of what some are calling the injection barrier for heart health.
Exactly.
So our mission today is to unpack this trial. We're going to get into the numbers. We'll talk about the impossible results that actually broke the lab machines, and of course the safety profile. But let's start with the context. Why do we even need this? You mentioned a technological ceiling.
Right.
I was reading the editorial that came out alongside the study. It was by a Dr. William Bowden, and he uses this really vivid metaphor. He describes a reef of risk.
It's a perfect metaphor. Think of a ship trying to navigate shallow waters. You can get close to the safe harbor, but if there's a reef hidden just under the surface, you're still going to crash.
And that reef is high cholesterol.
It's that reef of what we call dyslipidemic risk. Dyslipidemia is just the medical term for unhealthy lipid levels in your blood. And the current landscape, it's completely dominated by statins. They're the gold standard. They're cheap. They're generally safe. And they do work very well for a lot of people.
But not for everyone. That's the key, right?
Precisely. The guidelines have become extremely aggressive over the last few years. If you're at high risk, so let's say you've already had a heart attack, or maybe you have diabetes plus high blood pressure, we want your LDL, that bad cholesterol, to be incredibly low.
And when you say incredibly low, what are we talking about?
We're talking under 55 milligrams per deciliter. Some guidelines even say under 40.
Wow. Okay. That is very, very low.
It's extremely low. And the reality, as Dr. Bowden highlights in that editorial, is that up to 70% of patients who are on statins simply cannot get there.
70%.
70.
Yeah.
They take the maximum dose, they overhaul their diet, they do everything right, and they're still hovering at, 90 or 100. They're stuck on that reef.
And this is where the frustration really comes in for patients and doctors, isn't it? Because we technically have drugs that can fix this problem. We've had them for a few years. These PCSK9 inhibitors.
Right, the monoclonal antibodies. You might have heard the names evolocumab or elirocumab. They are incredibly potent. They work much better than statins for lowering LDL.
But they're injectables.
That's the catch. They're biological drugs, which means you have to inject them. Usually it's every 2 to 4 weeks for the rest of your life.
And I just have to imagine that's a really hard sell for a lot of people.
It's a massive barrier. It's why this whole category has been such a commercial disappointment, despite being a scientific triumph.
But people just don't want to do it.
It's more than that. Dr. Anne-Marie Navarre, who's the lead author of this new Enlicitide study, she's from UT Southwestern, she pointed out this just devastating data point in a press briefing yesterday.
What was it?
She said that despite how powerful these injectable drugs are, they were prescribed to only about 2.0 to 2.5% of the patients who are eligible and who actually need them.
2%? Are you serious?
2 to 2.5%.
Oh, that's a rounding error. It's almost statistically zero.
It's a failure of implementation on a massive scale. And it isn't just a fear of needles, though that's certainly part of it. The cost is a huge factor. These drugs are expensive.
And insurance must be a nightmare.
A total nightmare. Doctors have to fill out these long prior authorization forms. They get denied. They have to appeal. They get denied again. And then there's just the burden of it all. Storing the auto-injectors in the fridge, remembering to take it out, let it warm up, do the injection.
It's just too much friction.
Way too much friction for the average patient and, honestly, for the average busy primary care doctor.
So this is why the medical world has been on this quest. They've been hunting for the quote-unquote holy grail. They want the power of that injection, that super potent cholesterol-crushing ability.
But they want it in a form that you can just, toss in your mouth with your morning routine.
Maybe not with your coffee, as you mentioned.
Right. Maybe not with your coffee, and we will definitely get to that nuance later. But yes, the convenience of a pill with the power of a biologic. And that is exactly what Enlicitide is claiming to be.
Okay, so let's get into the science of this, because I think it's just fascinating how they pulled this off. This drug targets something called PCSK9. Now, we did promise no heavy acronyms, but this one is kind of unavoidable.
It is, but we can make it simple.
So can you explain in plain English what PCSK9 actually is and what it does?
Okay. Think of your liver as the main filtration system for your blood. On the surface of your liver cells, you have these little catcher's mitts. They're called LDL receptors.
Catcher's mitts, I like that.
And their job is to reach out into the bloodstream, grab a particle of that bad LDL cholesterol, and pull it into the liver where it can be broken down and removed.
Okay, that makes sense. So more catcher's mitts means less cholesterol floating around in your blood.
Exactly. More mitts, cleaner blood. Now, PCSK9 is a protein that your own body makes, and its job is to destroy those catcher's mitts.
It's like a shredder.
It's a perfect analogy. It's a shredder. It finds a receptor, binds to it, and the whole complex gets degraded. So if you have high levels of PCSK9, you're constantly shredding all your catcher's mitts. The cholesterol has nowhere to go, so it just keeps floating around in your blood, eventually clogging up your arteries.
So the goal is to stop the shredder.
You got it. If you can block PCSK9, you stop the shredder. The liver keeps all its receptors, they stick around for longer, and the liver becomes this super efficient vacuum cleaner for cholesterol.
And there's a really cool historical connection here, isn't there? I mean, this isn't just some random discovery. This goes way back to some Nobel Prize-winning work.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
This is the direct scientific lineage of the work done by Brown and Goldstein right there at UT Southwestern back in the 1980s.
The same institution as the lead author of this new study.
The very same. They won the Nobel Prize in 1985 for discovering the LDL receptor, the catcher's mitt itself. And then years later, researchers found these fascinating people who had natural genetic mutations where their bodies just didn't make much PCSK9.
And what were they like?
They had incredibly low cholesterol their entire lives, almost zero heart disease. That was the big aha moment. It was the proof from nature that if we can create a drug to block this target, we can save lives.
Okay, but here's the problem, and this is the part that always confuses me about drug development. We already knew how to block it with an injection. Why was it so unbelievably hard to put it in a pill? I mean, why couldn't they just, I don't know, freeze-dry the injection liquid and press it into a tablet?
Because of your stomach. The human stomach is a marvel of engineering, designed to do one thing exceptionally well. Destroy proteins.
Right, like a piece of steak.
Exactly. If you eat a piece of steak, your stomach acid and all your digestive enzymes go to work, breaking it down into its component amino acids. These injectable drugs, monoclonal antibodies, they're proteins. If you swallowed one, your stomach would digest it just like a burger. It would be completely useless.
So it would be the most expensive meal you've ever eaten, but it would do absolutely nothing for your cholesterol.
Precisely. So the challenge with Enlicitide was all about the chemistry. The drug itself is what we call a macrocyclic peptide. It's a small protein chain that's been sort of arranged in a ring to make it a bit tougher.
But that's not enough on its own.
Not nearly enough. It still wouldn't get absorbed well. So the real innovation here, the secret sauce, is that they paired the drug molecule with something called a permeation enhancer.
A permeation enhancer, that sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, but it's actually a fairly simple fatty acid called sodium caprate. And what it does is it essentially opens a temporary tiny back door in the wall of your intestine.
A back door.
It just allows the drug to slip through the intestinal lining and get into the bloodstream very quickly before all the digestive enzymes in the intestine can find it and tear it apart.
That is incredibly clever. It's almost like a biological Trojan horse.
In a way, yes, but it does come with that one important caveat I hinted at earlier. Because it relies on this specific absorption mechanism, you absolutely have to take it on an empty stomach.
Okay. And what was the protocol in the study?
The protocol was to take the pill first thing in the morning with a sip of water, and then wait for at least 30 minutes before eating or drinking anything else.
Which, when you compare that to injecting yourself with a needle every 2 weeks, that seems like a pretty fair trade-off.
I think most patients would agree with you there.
Okay, so we have the context, this reef of risk. We have the science, the oral pill that sneaks past the stomach's defenses. Now let's talk about the study itself. This is the CORALreef Lipids Phase 3 trial, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, which, that's the big leagues.
It's as big as it gets in medical research.
So who are they testing this on?
This was a massive undertaking. They recruited 2,909 adults, and they were spread across 14 different countries. But what's really crucial here is the profile of these participants.
Right. These were not healthy 20-year-olds they pulled off the street.
Not at all. These were people who were already in serious trouble. Looking at the data here, 58% of them already had a history of established cardiovascular disease. So they had already had a heart attack or a stroke or had a stent put in.
And the other 42%?
They were considered very high risk. They had conditions like diabetes or familial hypercholesterolemia, which is the genetic form of super high cholesterol. And here's the absolute key point. 95% of them were already taking statins.
So they were already being treated.
And most were on high-intensity statins, the strongest doses. They were doing everything they were supposed to be doing according to current guidelines.
And yet, what was their cholesterol like at the start of the study? What was their baseline?
Their average LDL was nearly 100 milligrams per deciliter. And remember, the safe zone, the target for these people, is under 55.
So despite the best available treatment, they were walking around with cholesterol levels that were nearly double what's considered safe.
That really drives home that ceiling concept we talked about. The statins were working, sure, but they just couldn't push that rock all the way up the hill. They'd hit a wall.
So the study design was a classic, right? Randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled.
The gold standard.
Yeah.
For every one person who got a placebo, a sugar pill, 2 people got the actual Enlicitide pill. And then they followed them for 52 weeks, a full year, to see what would happen to their cholesterol.
And what happened is, well, it's frankly astonishing. Let's look at the primary result, what they found at 24 weeks.
It is truly impressive. At that 24-week mark, the group taking Enlicitide saw their LDL levels drop by 55.8% more than the placebo group.
Let's just pause on that number for a second. Almost 56%.
To put that in a real-world context, that takes the average patient in this trial from a dangerous LDL of around 96 milligrams per deciliter down to about 40.
40. So that takes them from the danger zone way, way down into what we'd call optimal safety, and it does it in just 6 months.
It does. Dr. Navarre, the lead author, had a quote about this that I think says it all. She said, "These reductions in LDL cholesterol are the most we have ever achieved with an oral drug by far since the development of statins."
And she's not exaggerating, is she? I mean, how does this compare to other non-statin pills?
She is absolutely not exaggerating. If you look at the competitors, other oral drugs like bempedoic acid or ezetimibe, they typically lower LDL by about 18 or 19%.
So helpful, but not in the same league.
Not even in the same sport.
Yeah.
Enlicitide is hitting nearly 60%. That puts it right up there, toe-to-toe with those powerful injectable antibodies. It is essentially equal potency in a pill.
Now, there's a detail hidden away in the supplementary data that I absolutely love because it just goes to show how unprepared the world was for a pill this strong. There was a weird quirk in the data processing, wasn't there?
Yes, this is for the real data nerds out there, but it is fascinating. So when laboratories measure cholesterol, they often use a method called beta quantification. It's very precise, but it relies on a standard calculation curve.
Okay.
Well, the drug worked so well for some of the patients that their LDL levels dropped so low, the calculation actually returned a negative number.
They got negative cholesterol, so they broke the math.
They literally broke the math. Now, biologically, you cannot have negative cholesterol. It just means the level was below the lower detection limit of the formula they were using.
But because of the study rules, they had to handle that data in a certain way.
That's right. The original protocol for the study said that if a number comes back as invalid, like that, you have to sort of set it to a standard low number, which actually ended up skewing the averages and making the drug look slightly less effective than it was.
So they were actually undercounting how good the drug was because the lab machines couldn't keep up with the success.
Essentially, yes. When they went back and did what's called a post hoc analysis, which is basically a recheck where they fixed the statistical handling to properly account for these super responders, the efficacy wasn't 55.8%.
It was higher.
It was closer to 60%.
That's incredible. It's like you're running so fast you break the speedometer, so the cop writes you a ticket for going 0 miles per hour.
That's a very fair analogy.
Yeah.
It just highlights how incredibly potent this mechanism is. We are seeing levels of lipid clearing that we just didn't think were possible with a simple daily tablet.
But it wasn't just about LDL, the bad cholesterol, was it? The study looked at other things floating around in the blood. And this is where I think the expert perspective is really needed because we hear LDL, LDL, LDL all the time in the news. But there are other bad actors.
There certainly are. And in modern cardiology, we are definitely shifting our focus beyond just looking at LDL. We look very closely at something called apolipoprotein B, or ApoB for short.
Okay, unpack that for us. Why is ApoB so important?
The easiest way to think about it is this. Think of LDL cholesterol as the total amount of cargo being carried in a bunch of trucks on a highway.
Okay.
ApoB is the actual count of the trucks themselves. Every dangerous cholesterol particle has one ApoB molecule on it. So some experts believe that knowing the number of particles, the truck count, is actually a better predictor of whether you're going to have a crash or a heart attack than just knowing the total weight of the cargo.
That makes a lot of sense. So what did Enlicitide do to the truck count, to ApoB?
It reduced it by roughly 50%, which, again, this tracks almost perfectly with the LDL reduction. It's not just lightening the load in each truck. It's taking half the trucks off the road completely.
And then there's the other one, the one that's a real problem for a lot of families, lipoprotein, or LP, little a, as some people call it.
LPA, yes.
Yeah.
This is the big one when it comes to genetic risk. LPA is a specific type of sticky, nasty cholesterol particle, and your level of it is almost entirely determined by your genes.
So lifestyle has very little to do with it.
Very little. You can run marathons, eat nothing but kale, be as skinny as a rail, but if you inherit the gene for high LPA, your level will be high. And here's the real kicker. Statins do not lower LPA.
They don't touch it.
They don't touch it.
Yeah.
In fact, in some people, statins can actually make it go up slightly.
So for decades, people with high LPA have just been told, sorry, it's genetic, nothing we can do.
There have been very few options, and none of them were great. But in this trial, Enlicitide lowered LPA by roughly 28%.
28%.
Now, 28% isn't the 60% we saw with LDL. I want to be clear about that. But for a risk factor that we previously couldn't touch with a pill, there's a very significant and very welcome added benefit.
That sounds absolutely huge for people who have that strong family history. You know, the families where everyone seems to have a heart attack in their 50s, regardless of how they live.
Exactly. For those patients, this drug adds another completely separate layer of protection that the current standard of care statins simply cannot provide.
Okay, so the drug works. It works incredibly well. It works on multiple important fronts. But now we have to play the role of the skeptic.
As we should.
Because usually when something sounds this good, there's a price to pay. And I don't mean a financial price. I mean side effects. I mean, did the participants start growing a third ear? Did their livers shut down?
That is always the first question we ask with any new drug, especially an oral drug that's processed by the liver. Liver toxicity is a major, major worry. But surprisingly, the safety profile in the CORALreef lipids trial was remarkably clean.
How clean are we talking?
We are talking about the adverse events, so the bad things that happened to people during the study being almost identical between the group taking Enlicitide and the group taking the placebo.
So no real difference from a sugar pill?
Statistically, no meaningful difference. Most importantly, there was no signal of liver toxicity, which is what has killed some previous attempts at making powerful oral cholesterol drugs.
And what about muscle pain? The statin ache that so many people complain about.
Also, no difference. There was no increase in muscle pain or muscle-related side effects compared to placebo.
That is a very big deal. That's the number one reason so many people stop taking their statin medication.
It is, and since this drug works on a completely different biological pathway, it's blocking the PCSK9 shredder instead of the enzyme that statins target, it makes sense that it wouldn't cause those same muscle aches. But seeing that confirmed in a large, year-long trial is very, very reassuring.
So it's highly effective and it appears to be very safe. Are there any limitations? We have to be fair here. What are the caveats?
We must be, and the biggest limitation is simply time. This study was 52 weeks long, 1 year. Atherosclerosis, the buildup of that plaque in your arteries, is a process that takes decades.
So a year isn't long enough to know everything.
Exactly. We need to know if this excellent safety profile holds up over 5 years or 10 years. Does the pill start to irritate the stomach lining after 3 years of daily use? We simply don't have that data yet.
And there's another major gap, right? We know it lowers the number. We have definitive proof of that. But we don't yet have definitive proof that it stops the event.
That is the so what gap. In medicine, we always distinguish between a biomarker, like the LDL number on your blood test, and a clinical outcome, like having a heart attack, having a stroke, or dying.
And this study only looked at the biomarker.
It did. We have proven that Enlicitide fixes the biomarker. And we assume, based on decades of other science, that fixing the biomarker will improve the outcome. But we have not yet proven it for this specific drug.
And this is what Dr. Bowden brought up in his editorial. He said, we have to wait for the CORALreef outcomes trial.
Correct. That is a separate, even larger trial that is running right now, specifically designed to answer that question. But the results aren't expected until December of 2029.
2029. So we are looking at nearly 4 more years of waiting before we have the definitive, rock-solid proof that this pill actually saves lives and doesn't just improve blood tests.
That is the standard, rigorous timeline for science. But, that being said, given how strongly and consistently we know that lowering LDL drives down heart attacks, most cardiologists are going to be very optimistic. We are, in essence, betting on the biology here. If you lowered LDL by 60%, it is highly, highly likely that you are preventing heart attacks.
So let's talk about the implications then. Assuming this gets FDA approval, and based on this data, it seems like a pretty strong candidate, what does the future look like? Dr. Navarre called it a potential game changer. Is that just hype, or is that real?
I think it's very real. And the reason isn't just about the potency of the drug itself. It's about the democratization of the treatment.
What do you mean by that, democratization?
Well, right now, getting this level of high-potency cholesterol treatment is kind of an elite sport. You need to see a specialist, you need to have great insurance that will prove an expensive drug, and you need to be comfortable and compliant with self-injections. It's difficult to access.
It's a high barrier to entry.
A very high barrier.
Yeah.
But if you can put that same power into a simple pill, then any primary care doctor in any town in America can write a script for it. Take this once a day, 30 minutes before breakfast. That removes all the complexity.
Removes the needle barrier.
It completely removes the needle barrier.
Yeah.
And that means we can treat millions of people who are currently falling through the cracks, the people stuck on that reef of risk. Dr. Navarre's vision is that this could dramatically improve our ability to prevent heart attacks on a massive population-wide level.
It feels like a shift in philosophy, too. For so long, the goal has just been to manage high cholesterol. Keep it under control. This feels much more like we are trying to eradicate the risk.
That's a great way to put it. That is the trend in modern lipid management. We're moving to a world where high LDL is viewed almost like an infection. You don't just manage an infection, you want to wipe it out entirely.
And with drugs this powerful, you can really do that.
We can. We can get people's cholesterol down to levels that we normally only see in newborns. And the theory is, if we do that, the atherosclerotic plaque simply cannot build up in the arteries in the first place.
That is a very powerful image, a future where heart disease becomes more of an optional tragedy rather than an inevitability for so many people.
We're not quite there yet, but this is a major, major step down that road.
So for the listener who's tuning in right now, maybe they're on a statin, maybe their parents are on a statin, maybe they just got their blood work back and the doctor did that little sound when they looked at the LDL. What is the practical takeaway for them today, February 6th, 2026?
The main takeaway is that the landscape is changing, and it's changing fast. If you are on a statin and your LDL is still above 70, or certainly if it's anywhere near 100, you are sitting on that reef of risk that we talked about at the beginning.
And you don't have to just accept that anymore.
You don't. Keep an eye on the name Enlicitide. It will likely go through the FDA approval process fairly soon. But even now, this news is a prompt. It's a prompt to have a more aggressive conversation with your cardiologist or your primary care doctor.
What should you ask?
Ask about your specific numbers. Ask what your personal LDL target should be. Ask about your ApoB. Ask about your LPA. Ask if you are truly at your goal or if you are just close enough, because close enough is where the danger lies.
And I think that is a perfect place to leave it for today. We are looking at a potential revolution in a pill bottle. It is very rare that we get to see the moment a technological ceiling breaks. But looking at this data from yesterday, I think we just heard the glass shatter.
I think you're right. It is a very exciting time for preventive cardiology.
But until that final outcomes data arrives in 2029, we will be watching very, very closely. Thank you for helping us unpack this massive study.
My pleasure. It was a lot to get through.
And to you, the listener, thank you for diving deep with us. Keep questioning, keep reading, and as always, stay curious and stay informed. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.